Welcome everyone to the Billy Slater Podcast. The rugby league season is here. We saw two great games in Vegas over the weekend. Peter Psaltis with you, along with Billy Slater, of course. Mark Levy, he's travelling in seat 1A coming back from Las Vegas. But how are you, Billy?
I'm good, thanks, Salty, and welcome to our podcast on debut, mate. Obviously, filling in for Mark Levy, who's flying high up in first class, going over to Vegas, and we obviously didn't get the invite, so we're back here in Australia, and we'll analyse the games, analyse the whole shabacle and experience of what was Las Vegas, and also dive into the games coming up this weekend. So, looking forward to the next hour, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, mate, let's get straight into it. And a historic weekend for the game in Las Vegas. For us watching here on Channel 9 over the weekend, it looked really good, didn't it? The pictures coming in, not just, I suppose, on Sunday afternoon, but for the whole week, it looked really good. A big tick for the game, do you think?
Absolutely. Look, it looked good. It felt good. The conversations you have with everyone in the general public, there's just been a real excitement about our game, and it's didn't know how it was going to be received over in America, but I think it's been really positive. It's certainly been positive in Australia. The hype around round one or round zero, as they're calling it, I think it's just been a real injection of life into our game, and we all don't know what is possible that will come out of it. But at the end of the day, in our country, it's created a whole heap of attention for us, and now we get an opportunity to get stuck into our season. The four teams that went over there would have been really excited to go and fly the flag for the NRL and go and put on a performance, and I thought they did that. So hopefully they all come home in one piece after Saturday night after the game, but it looked like a real enjoyable weekend for them.
You can guarantee that 13 clubs that weren't involved on the weekend, all of them will be putting their hand up now to want a piece of it because it's great for them, I suppose, corporate-wise, the fans as well, getting into it. They'll all want to be part of it now that we've seen that it can happen and the NRL pulled it off.
And I saw a lot of Australians over there too. I think a lot of people went over as a little family holiday. They went and saw Las Vegas. They may have stayed in other parts of America, and then they went and watched their team play. So I think if we rotate those four teams each year, it'll give a different group of fans an opportunity to go and travel and get over to America and watch their team perform.
I know we'll get onto the game specifically in just a moment, Billy, but one of the real talking points from a football point of view in the lead up to the week was the dimensions of the ground. Well, that was all put to bed, wasn't it, with 11 tries in that first game between South and Manly?
Yeah, I thought both games were really entertaining. And to be honest, I think the referee had a lot to do with that. I thought they handled the situation really well. They let the game flow and they let the fatigue create the space for the game. That is the ultimate thing that creates space in our game is fatigue. And I thought they refereed, outstanding, to be honest. And look, the dimensions probably hampered a few players and a few teams with the style of play, but at the end of the day, it's a game that everyone has to play on. There was still enough space. Still, the things that work in a game of rugby league on a normal dimension field, they work on those smaller dimension fields as well. You complete your sets, you complete high, and you work as a team, you defend well, and you give yourself a good chance to win the game. And the two teams that did that the best, the Manly Sea Eagles and the Roosters, they come out on top. So although the dimensions were a little bit limiting some players and some teams, everyone had to play on it.
Is there anything that came to mind to you, whether in commentary yesterday or throughout the week, and you thought, why aren't they trying this? Is there anything that, or is it a case of they pretty much got it right? Is there anything you'd look to change, whether it be from a football point of view, build up, marketing, anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I don't know. I looked at the whole experience and thought that the NRL have done a great job. Peter V'landys and Andrew Abdo have, they've gone out there. They're really ambitious about growing our game and presenting our game to a different audience. We all know that the more people that can be involved in our game, whether it be through sponsorship, membership, even just eyes on our game, the more revenue our game can create, and therefore the more money we can put into grassroots, the more money we can put into developing our game. That's only a positive thing. And I think Peter V'landys and Andrew Abdo have done a great job of being ambitious about growing our game. So hats off to them. They've done a great job. Time will tell whether it's going to be profitable, but I think it's moving in the right direction. I don't have any improvements just yet, mate.
All right. Well, let's get on to the games themselves. And the first one yesterday was South and Manly, the Seagulls. Tom Trbojevic, it was great to see him come on and have a immediate impact in round one. And they looked really good, Manly, yesterday. What did you make of their win over the Rabbitohs?
Yeah, classy players make a difference, don't they? And you just see the quality of player Tom Trbojevic is when he's done it before. He's been injured, had season-ending injuries, and he's come out the next year and he's just really hit the ground running. He's a top-line player, and right from the opening 5 minutes, you could see that Tom Trbojevic has had an incredible preseason. He's fit and he's healthy, and that's a good thing for our game. He's such a good person, Tom, and so is Jake. But they deserve everything they get. They work really hard, and it was great to see him perform to his optimal. Hamstrings and shoulders and all these injuries have hampered him for so long, but he was a big contributor and why Manly play well, and he'll be a big contributor in the rest of their season. I thought it was a real seesawing battle. South Sydney were on top for a big portion of that game, and Manly hung in there. I think they were down 20 points to 12 at one stage there, and they fought their way back and ended up winning convincingly. So an impressive start to the season for the Manly Seagulls, and I'm sure Anthony Seibold and Daly Cherry Evans will be really happy with their team.
Made mention of Daly Cherry Evans there. His new halves partner, Luke Brooks. They combined very well for a first-up outing for the two of them.
Didn't he look happy when he scored that try?
Yeah.
I think everyone in the NRL, both players, supporters, coaches, they were happy for him as well. He's nearly a veteran, Luke Brooks, and he's had a lot of attention around him when he was played at the Tigers, and now he's moved on. He just looked really free and happy, and that's what you want from a player that's been through a whole heap of adversity and a whole heap of drama surrounding his performances and criticism. And I was really happy to see him smiling and playing his best footy, because he's a wonderful player. And he's a really strong player. He's quick off the mark. He's strong in contact. He nearly scored another try in the first half. And I think playing outside Daly Cherry Evans and then having Tom Trbojevic floating around him as well, that'll free him up immensely. And he'll just be able to focus on the strengths of his game, which is run the football, organise your little area around you, and kick when you see space in front of you. And I think he's in for a good year.
We may mention of Tom Trbojevic, Jake Trbojevic. I want to ask about Ben Trbojevic. He looked right at home too in the back row.
There's no more, is there? Is there any more?
I think there is.
They'll find a position for mum and dad shortly. It's great. And you know what? They're Manly people. They grew up in the Manly area. You often hear stories about them going down to the local footy clubs and helping out with the sausage sizzle and all that sort of stuff. That's what rugby league's about. It's about the community, and they represent Manly really well. So it's good to see the three brothers playing alongside each other. Ben's doing wonderfully well. Obviously, the younger brother of the two, and he plays a different position. He's a little bit of a hybrid, a mix between Jake and Tom. Doesn't quite have Tom's top end ability and speed, but has a bit of that, and then has a mix of the toughness and the forwards that Jake possesses as well. So he's locked down that back row position for Manly, and you'd expect that he wouldn't let the team down, being a Trbojevic. So he's in for another good year as well.
Just on South Sydney, they, of course, still got Jack Whiten to come into the team. It's great seeing Latrell Mitchell looking really good. As you mentioned, they were on top for a lot. So I suppose a lot of the game yesterday. So I suppose one of the things, Billy, is that we often learn is that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater after a round one loss.
And you can do that sometimes when you're results driven and you're focusing on the results. I think Jason Demetrio and the South Sydney Rabbitohs would be beneficial not to focus on the result and focus on what they did well and trying to outlay that a little bit more, because they looked really dangerous, especially early in the game when Damien Cook was getting out. He looked really fast. Look, it's round one, and it's really hard to put consistency into your game early in the season. So that's all they need to build. Their best is good enough. They just need to find it more often.
We're going to see one heck of a clash in a couple of Thursdays' time when they take on the Broncos at Suncorp Stadium to kick off round two. Lachlan Ilias and that rundown of Jason Saab as well, and the ankle tap, that was special.
It was DCE like in the Origin, wasn't it? And those sort of efforts, like Lachlan Ilias, he's a competitor, and he's got that in his game. That was a huge moment in the game. Jason Saab was away, and he just got a fingertip to his boot and ankle tapped him. But you've got to do that all the time, and that's the sort of player that Lachlan Ilias is. He'd be covering those sort of tackles all the time. He may not always get there. He may not even be needed at times, but they're the habits you want in your team, and I'm sure that'll be celebrated.
Let's get on to the next game, and the Roosters, too good for the Broncos here. In Billy, just overall, before we talk about some of the incidents and magic moments that occurred in that game, it was a really good, tough game of football.
It was, and it was the second game. I thought they were two perfect matchups, very close affairs, and I just think the Roosters got the basics done better than the Broncos in this one. We're all talking about the speed and the youth of the Brisbane Broncos, obviously carrying that disappointment over the summer of losing the grand final and using that as motivation, and I'm sure it will be there. It'll be whether they're with them for a long period of time and until they rectify it and win one. But yeah, the Roosters just gave the Broncos a lesson in the fundamentals of the game. I think they were 11 from 11 at one period, and they just gave them nothing. And got an intercept try to Joey Manu, who I thought was probably the best player on the field. If it wasn't for their captain in James Tedesco, but they've had a good off season. I heard Victor Radley talking after the game about the mentality of the group at the moment, and he spoke about the first conversation the group had with Trent Robinson coming back to preseason, and it was a really honest one. They realised that they drifted away from the team that won the premiership back in 2019, the back-to-back premiership. And they were a long way off where that team was, so they needed to recreate who they were. And I think it's a really good step in the right direction. I think Trent Robinson would be really happy with the performance that they put in over in Vegas.
Couple of players to talk about in that Roosters team before we touch on the Broncos. Luke Keary, and seeing him, Billy, not just what he was doing with ball in hand, but defensively as well, starting off the season full of confidence, both in attack and defence.
Well, when you've got players with a whole heap of talent and a lot of class, guys like Luke Keary, it's really important for those players to focus on the simple things, the real simple things, and the work ethic things. And Luke Keary's been through a fair bit in his career. He went through some head injuries, some concussion things that. Look, I don't think a lot of us, even me, I don't know how we would all react to that. Injuries are injuries, but head injuries are very different, and they can play with your mind when you're coming back. And I think Luke has gone through some of that, but he showed no signs of that on the weekend. And he played courageous, he played tough, and then the class comes off the back of it because he gives himself a chance to be in the game, and that's what he outlays. So. Yeah, if the Roosters are going to go forward, they're going to need Sam Walker and Luke Keary to really build that combination.
And James Tedesco, the skipper, you touched on him just before. He was in everything.
Yeah, he was the best player on the field. Joey Manu had some real impressive touches and classy moments, but James Tedesco was as competitive as I've ever seen him. His work rate was high, and he had a lot of quality in his game. Some of the things that he did, he looked as fast and sharp as I've seen him in a number of years. So he got heavily criticised last year, and he's obviously, Trent Robinson said that he came back to training earlier than he needed to, and it's paying off now. I think he's in for a big year. I think the Roosters are in for a big year. They already had a great squad, and then they had the additions of Spencer Leniu and Dominic Young added to that squad. They were without Dom Young, Jared Warrior-Hargraves, Billy Smith, Connor Watson. Like, there's some classy players that didn't play on the weekend, so they've got a lot of depth there at the Roosters, and they're off to a good start.
Yeah, they certainly are. We saw a moment right on half-time, Sam Walker slotting a field goal that was then disallowed. This is a new rule that's that they're really clamping down on, and that is the blockers. We're all told about it in the pre-season by Graham Annesley, and there it was for us to see. You happy with that?
Yeah, I think on replay, watching it back, it created a disruption to the player going to put pressure on Sam Walker, and I don't think it was intentional. I think it was out of pure habit just to stand there. It was Lindsay Collins, and Victor Radley actually ran over to that side of the field as well. But it certainly is something that is going to take a little bit of getting used to. But I think they got the decision right on that one. You just can't stand next to the ball anymore. You've actually got to be active, and you've got to be looking like you're a chance of getting the football. So that's the way that the game is turning, and we've all got to adapt. All the players have got to adapt to this because it's a habit in the game that has been there for a few years now.
Yeah, well, at least we saw it in round one, and players can say, "Okay, this is what we've got to do," because it's not in a final or a grand final, or dare say, Billy, in an Origin.
Just on that, I think the players over those first two games and even the preseason games, I think the players have adapted really well to the adjustments to the rules. The downtown rule, I think you watch the teams and they're pretty consistent of staying behind the ball before the ball's kicked. So that's going to create some more opportunities for the outside backs, and back threes can get really creative now, and there's going to be a little bit more space for them before they get to the defensive line. So, it'll be interesting how that little period, that little area of the game evolves, and I'm sure it will evolve because there's a little bit more space there, and we might see fullbacks linking up with their wingers, even halves getting back for kick returns. There's a whole heap of opportunity there to take that space, and the players are really adapting to those adjustments to the rules well.
Your thoughts on the Broncos?
Yeah, look, I thought the Broncos tried really hard. I thought they got a little bit frustrated at times, and they tried to, at the end of the game, they tried to push passes, chasing points. Like I said before, the Roosters just gave them a lesson in the fundamentals of the game. And look, I don't think the Broncos have anything to worry about. Brendan Piakura went off early in this contest, and that created a whole heap of disruption. He's a wonderful player. Losing Kurt Capewell is a negative for the club, but Brendan Piakura is a wonderful player, and I think he's a player of the future. But him going off didn't just disrupt that edge. And Pat Carrigan has played there, but he's not a natural edge back rower. But what that does, it takes Pat Carrigan away from the middle of the field. So all of a sudden, you've got Payne Haas that does a lot of the work in the middle of the field, having to not only shoulder the load of Pat Carrigan not being there, but also Tom Flegler, who left to the Dolphins at the end of last year as well. So there was a real disruption in the middle of the field, taking Pat Carrigan out of that position and putting him on the edge. The first try resulted in a little bit of confusion where Ezra Mam threw an intercept pass. It was meant to be for Pat Carrigan. It was supposed to be on the inside of Joey Manu. So, look, there's not a whole heap to worry about. I think the circumstances didn't help them. They'll learn a whole heap from playing against a team that got the basics right.
There was a moment in the game yesterday, Reece Walsh trying to stop. Well, he did end up stopping Daniel Tupou from scoring in the corner. You spoke a fair bit about this here in the coverage. He's since been charged with dangerous contact. It's a $3,000 fine with the early guilty plea. And I know, as you've said, this is something that you've very familiar with back from 2018. But just to explain to the viewers here, Billy, just on what else could he have done there in trying to stop Tupou in scoring?
Yeah, I think firstly, I think we all could see it was a shoulder charge, and I think they've got this right. It's probably a penalty. He's been charged with a grade 1. It's a fine. He's about to sign a big contract, so he's going to be okay with the fine. So, look, it's I think I'm pretty comfortable where it sits and how they've handled the NRL's handled it. The only thing is the next time he gets put in that position where he's got 3 duty of cares for me. He's got the duty to compete. He's a rugby league player. His job is to create entertainment, and to create entertainment you need to compete. The second thing he's got to do, he's got a duty of care to the opponent that he doesn't make dangerous contact. Now, I don't think he did that. And then the third thing is he's got a duty of care to himself to keep himself safe as well, to make the safest contact for himself. And out of those 3, if he makes any other kind of tackle, he's actually not giving himself the duty of care, because he could knock himself out making a conventional tackle. If Daniel Tupou turns back into him at the last moment when he's top speed going towards that corner post to compete, he's in a lot of trouble. He didn't make high contact. He didn't make any head contact. There was no dangerous contact. Sure, he's performed a tackle that is a shoulder charge, which is illegal. I get that. I get that. That's why I'm comfortable with the outcome. But given the situation again, he either doesn't compete or he puts himself in a dangerous position. That's the only other 2 things that I feel he can do. So I'm good with the punishment. I'm okay with where it sits. But I've been in this position. I know exactly what is going through his mind, because you're heading 90 degrees to the guy with the ball, and you're heading for the same blade of grass that he's trying to get to. There's not a whole heap you can do safely. And I think the safest contact was the contact that he made.
Would have been a whole lot simpler if there was a fine around in 2018, hey?
Would have saved me a few sleepless nights and a flight to Sydney and back. But that's the way it goes.
What did you make of Reece Walsh, by the way? Just his game overall yesterday.
Yeah, I thought he was good. I'm in the media, so we all talk about results and all that sort of stuff. I'm not a results-driven person when I watch players and when I watch games, and I thought his game was really good. Actually, he was one of the better Broncos out there, one of the better players on the field, and I thought he injected himself into the game. He was heavily involved, and when Reece Walsh is heavily involved in the game, it's near impossible for him not to do good stuff. He's got so much class and talent. There's a lot of players that would love his attributes as a footy player, and so I think it was a really good hit out for Reece in his first game. Like I said, heavily involved, come up with some great moments. That try for Dean Mariner, where he had absolutely no room. He shifted off his left foot outside Suaalii and then just dropped it on his boot, his left boot, instinctively. And Dean Mariner showed enough speed to get there. But those sort of things will come when Reece just puts himself in the game. And I think that's the focus for him is just how can I get myself in the game as much as possible. And the other number 1 on the other team did a great job of that. They competed really well against each other, and they brought out the best in each other.
Sure did. There was another incident in the game yesterday, which we can't discuss too much about because they are just allegations. It's what Spencer Leniu has allegedly used a racial slur against Ezra Mam. And Billy, this will be played out at the judiciary. It's been referred directly to the panel, as is always the case with incidents such as this.
Yeah, my first reaction is I really feel for Ezra. For him to feel like this, and I know Ezra, he's a really good lad. He's only a young fella. He's just turned 21. He's a really good fella, and for him to react like this and make a formal complaint on the field in the heat of battle, things are said on the field all the time, and most of it is just brushed away. But for him to do that, it's really hit him deep. So I really feel for Ezra. I hope he's okay. I'm sure he's got good people around him, both family and support within the Brisbane Broncos. So that's where my concern is. Outside of that, like you mentioned, Salty, I don't know if I can say too much, or I don't even know the allegations and all that sort of stuff. So it'll get handled correctly through the NRL. Look, there's that many microphones on the field and that sort of stuff that it's really hard to say stuff with that's not going to be picked up. So I'm sure there'll be some sort of audio used at the judiciary, and I'm sure they'll handle it accordingly.
This is the Billy Slater Podcast for Ram Trucks. Eats everything else for breakfast. Well, Billy, Thursday night, round one continues. This is going to be a beauty. We all remember what that finals game was like last year. Knights v Raiders at McDonald Jones Stadium in Newcastle. I say bring it on.
Yeah, that was an incredible atmosphere. I think I nearly became a Knights fan watching that game live, calling that game at McDonald Jones, and it was such a great vibe, such a great club. I think the community make the club up there in the Hunter Valley, and really good people, and they've got a bit of a footy team on their hands. They had a great run last year into the finals. Kalen Ponga ended up picking up the Dally M medal off the back of a wonderful second half of the year. And now we get the opportunity to see the Raiders and life at the Raiders without Jack Whiten. So how does that look? Who plays in the halves? And what sort of mentality does Ricky Stewart bring into this Raiders team? Can only imagine it's going to be a tough, gritty one. That's the only way Ricky Stewart knows how to instill in his team, and they've still got some wonderful players there, and Josh Papali'i and Joseph Tarpany's one of, if not the best forwards in the game, and it's going to be a great contest to kick off round one in Australia.
Yeah, can't wait for that one. So that's 8 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time on Thursday night. Now, Friday night's two games. Warriors Sharks is the early game. This will be huge. You can just imagine almost the house full sign will go up at Go Media Stadium over in Auckland. Return to the NRL for Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. I don't know if you got to see too much of his trial form, but he looked really good in the trials, Billy.
I did. I watched him closely, and he's the number one player that I'm looking forward to watching this year is Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. And only 5 years ago, he was the best player in our game, won the Dally M medal, and had a little stint away from the game over in rugby union. And he comes back and he's playing a different position. And from what I've seen from the trials, he is going to really excel. I think he'll be a top line center in our game within a short period of time. He's still got those. How would you describe his feet? He's got the fastest feet in the game. Like he makes people look silly, and he's not very young anymore. But I think he's going to be a wonderful addition. Haven't the Warriors really recruited well? You think about the year that they had last year, and the team ethos that Andrew Webster has instilled in them. Sean Johnson's got a new lease of life. Then you add the standards of Kurt Capewell and an ex-captain, an ex-Dally M medalist in Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. I think they're in for an incredible year. If they can stay healthy, they've really picked up where they left off in the trials from last year, and I think they can beat the Sharks early in this season. So I'm going to tip the Warriors here.
All right, they've had some good clashes in recent times. Now on Friday night, Melbourne Storm at home against the Panthers at 8 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. Can't wait for this one, Billy. This should be a ripping clash down at Amy Park.
This will be a belter. Two of the real heavyweights of the competition. I thought the Roosters and Broncos was a heavyweight contest, and this is as well. The Panthers, every year you hear it over the last few years, is they've lost this player, they've lost that player, and then they win the competition. They've lost this player, that player, and that player, then they win the competition. The basics hold up in our game, and they've got the basics down pat. They're the best at the foundation of the game, and they didn't go overly well in the World Club Challenge this year, but that happened last year as well. So I think it's going to be a great contest. Ryan Pappenhausen back for the Melbourne Storm. He's had a really good off season. He's had a lot of time to get over that broken leg, which was a devastation for not just him, but the club and the game. He's gone through a fair bit, Ryan Pappenhausen. So it'll be good to see him back with hopefully Munster. He's under an injury cloud. Hopefully he's back. Jerome Hughes, Harry Grant. They've got a lot of quality in their team, and I'm actually sitting down with Ryan Pappenhausen after this podcast. We're recording on the Monday, and I'm going to sit down with him and have a chat with him for the Sunday footy show. So keep an eye out for that. There'll be a little bit on the Friday night telecast, but it'll be interesting to see where his head's at leading into this season.
Just on the Storm and coming into the year, I was actually with the halfback Jerome Hughes and coach Craig Bellamy. They're at a charity lunch on the Gold Coast for the Currumbin Eagles, supporting them on the weekend. And just Jerome, he's a player that quite often, Billy, doesn't get spoken about. It's a lot about Pappenhausen. It's a lot about Cameron Munster, but he's just such an important player in this Melbourne Storm team, isn't he? The number 7.
Yeah, I think he's probably the controlled player amongst the other 4. You've got Grant, Pappenhausen, and Munster. You wouldn't call Munster overly controlled, but on the field either. But he's just got this control within his game that controls the kicking. He plays the percentages really well, but he's also a great ball runner. You see him bounce off that right foot and keep those players on the inside really honest and filling the space. And I think he complements those other players which have so much brilliance in their game. You think of the speed of Pappenhausen. Munster just plays so free and so dangerous when he's not thinking a whole heap. He's just got players around him moving. And then Grant's a little bit of a mix. He's got the control, but he's also quite instinctive and plays what he sees in front of him. So I think Jerome Hughes holds the key for the Melbourne Storm, where he can just really settle those really exciting players around him down and just play the percentages, which is a little bit what Cameron Smith was really good at, where he didn't have to say a whole heap. He talks with his actions, and he sets the team on what their mindset is with his actions. He might kick early. He might, play the percentage play, or he might get into shape and pull the trigger on some shape. So, yeah, I think he's a really important cog for the Melbourne Storm.
Before we move on, will we see Suafar-Longo?
Yeah, I think we will. I don't know. If one position is a luxury for the Melbourne Storm, it's that utility role. You think of Bronson Garlick, Tyron Wishart, and Suafar-Longo. You've got 2 great wingers in Warbrick and Xavier Coates. But yeah, I'd be trying to find a spot for him somewhere, because he's a wonderful player. He's just re-signed with the club for another 5 years, so he's there for a long period of time. And I know he's been working hard in the off season, so I think it's time for Sua to enter the NRL again.
All right. Now on Saturday, Eels play Bulldogs on Saturday afternoon. Big game for both of these clubs. I know, once again, Billy, we say it's only round 1, but big change at the Bulldogs, now captained by Stephen Crichton, and the Eels, well, grand finalists in 2022 and missed the 8 last year.
Yeah, both teams will be looking to get off to a good start. The Bulldogs, always so much attention around the Bulldogs, and I can't wait for the Bulldogs to have a a successful year and start playing finals and that, because there's going to be so much hype around them. They've had such loyal supporters, stick by them. So, they're heading in the right direction. Stephen Crichton's a wonderful athlete. He looks like a real leader, and he's shown some great quality in that department early in this season. So, he'll be a great addition. Also picked up some other great players, but I just think Parramatta have got a point to prove. They would be really disappointed with their season last year, and in particularly Dylan Brown, who missed a whole heap of football at the back end of the year. He looks like he's in for a really big season, and I think it's the right time for Dylan to really take his game to a new level, and this year might just be it.
Saturday night, Titans play Dragons. The Des Hasler era begins at the Titans, and the Shane Flanagan era begins at the Dragons.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Two old coaches, two premiership winning coaches, heading to two clubs that need a little bit of that injection of success into their organisation, and they're both hard men. They both are uncompromising through their training, and you can see that in the trial form. Look, I really like the Dragons. I think the Dragons they finished second last year, Salty, and I really think that they can climb that ladder. They're probably the most physical team in the competition, and if you don't turn up with the greatest of commitment and dedication into the tough part of the game, they'll bash you up. And I just think early in this season, I think the Dragons can get off to a good start.
All right. Well, yeah, big game, that one. Now on Sunday afternoon, Sunday footy on 9 comes from Suncorp Stadium. It's the Dolphins against the Cowboys. Cowboys will be looking, they're similar to you were talking about the Eels before. Big year in 2022, didn't deliver last year. And the Dolphins, Farnworth, Flegler, Avarillo added to their team.
Yeah, great recruitment at the Dolphins. And I actually read somewhere, it was a headline from Wayne Bennett saying that it's one of, if not the best off seasons he's had in his 50 years. So that's saying something. He would have had some great pre-seasons at different clubs, and especially the Broncos through an era. But they've obviously worked really hard. Real shame that Tom Gilbert has done his knee, and he's going to miss the season after injuring his shoulder last year mid-season, and so that's going to be a bit of a blow. But to pick up the likes of Flegler, Farnworth, Avarillo, they're good signings, and they're going to make your club better. I think Tom Flegler is a wonderful signing. Payne Haas and Pat Carrigan got a lot of the accolades last year, and rightfully so. But Tom Flegler was certainly right up in that class with them. He's elevated his game to a top line front rower. Played 2 Origins last year. Was unavailable for the third one, and I think that's a really smart signing by Wayne Bennett and the Dolphins, and I think he can really lead that pack forward into the next decade.
Well, we look forward to that. The first Queensland derby of the year on Sunday. Dolphins are up against the Cowboys. This is the Billy Slater Podcast. Thanks to Ram Trucks. Eats everything else for breakfast. Now, Billy, we've got some viewer questions, and you can also take part in this, folks. Billy Slater Podcast at 9.com.au is the email address. Billy Slater Podcast at 9.com.au. And these questions come from various comments over our various platforms that we're on. So this is from Kev. Hey, Billy, can you tell us a bit about Suafa'alonga? We touched on him just a moment ago. Have you had a bit to do with him? I see he's just signed that new 5-year deal. No, Billy, that Craig Bellamy in that function I was at the other day compared him to a young Cameron Munster. I made sure that he was just talking about on the field and not off the field. He assured me he's off the field completely different.
He's a great young man, actually, Sua. He's I don't know where Craig got that from. Sua is much faster than Cameron Munster, but he's probably the similarity to Cameron Munster is probably just the stuff that he does that you just shake your head and go, wow, how did he do that? I'm very fortunate to get the opportunity to work with classy players like Sua, Ryan Pappenhausen, and obviously the Queenslanders as well, and help them build their career. He, like I said, he's a wonderful person, Sue. He was born over in Samoa, and his family moved over to Victoria when he was only young. He was 12 years old, I think, 12 or 13 years old, and his family has since moved back to Samoa. So he lives here with, I think, one of his siblings, and he travels, I think, over an hour to get into training. And like that's the work ethic, and that's the want that he has to fulfill a dream. And now he's just signed a long-term contract. It's great working with those sort of guys, and then you've got the talent on top of it. So he's gonna build his game over the next handful of years, and he's going to be a wonderful player. I don't know what position he's going to end up in, but to be honest, he's one of those players that it doesn't really matter. You just get him out on the field, and he can play in the middle of the field. He can play on the wing. He can play fullback. Wouldn't surprise me if he played a bit of dummy half. So he's just one of those players that you just get him involved in the game, and good things will happen.
All right. Mel sends through a message and says, how big of a loss is Cohen Hess for the season? Can the Cowboys make the 8 without him? He was one shining light last year. He had a good season last year, Cohen, and he, of course, another one who's done his ACL, and we won't see him in 2024.
Yeah, he's one of those players that you think you don't. He's not a player that club season's over when they're out for the year, sort of a player that comes to mind, but he is in some sense, because he's a guy that really sets the standards of the club and sets the standards of the little things in the middle of the field. I've really admired what he's brought to the Cowboys over the last 12 to 18 months in terms of his new role when he shifted to the middle. He did a lot of those team things really well. You've got Reuben Cotter in the middle there that really sets those standards as well. But Cohen Hess has had a great little 12 months, 18 months in the middle of the field. So it's going to be a huge blow. The one shining light for the Cowboys, I thought, in the trials was Thomas McKaylee. He was unbelievable. So I think, if anything, they've added a little bit of depth there. Griffin Neems had a great year, but in terms of those little qualities, actions in the middle of the field, someone's going to have to pick up that role.
And just on Thomas McKaylee, he wasn't even in the top 30 going into the trials, and had his contract. Yeah, he is now. He is now. That's for sure.
Quick, sign him up.
Absolutely. Yeah, they've done that. Now, this is from Ben, who says, hi, Billy. Who are your favourite and least favourite teammates to room with during your playing days, and why?
Oh, Salty, I don't really have least favourite teammates to room with. I've had some good teammates to room with. I've roomed with Will Chambers for a bit. He's just he's just a funny guy, Will. Didn't mind the races, so we had the races on a bit. And the other guy that I roomed with a whole heap was Matt King. So clothes were optional, but other than that, it was pretty good.
What I think people have to understand is that most rep teams these days, you get your own room, don't you?
Yeah. I don't know what it is. I'd get lonely. Roommates were good. It was a good time being away. With the team, and great sort of camaraderie time. But also those down times in your room where you're just sitting down and chilling out. Yeah, it's good.
So having a roomie is good, you say. If you were born 10 years earlier or 10, 15 years earlier, would you have been happy having a roomie like Alfie?
No.
Yeah.
Leave that for Gilly. Gilly's Alfie's roomie. Yeah, I'll leave that one alone.
Or even now, if you were playing now, have a roommate like Cameron Munster. So
yeah, that'd be a good room. Cameron Munster and Alan Langer.
Oh,
you reckon there'd be much sleeping getting going on there?
No, and I wouldn't like to be in either room, either side of them either. Keep those questions coming in each week. So Billy Slater Podcast at 9.com.au. Billy, this has been fun, mate. Thanks very much. I think we're done.
Good work.
We're done, unless what do you usually do at this time? Sing a song?
Nothing, mate. I'm just having so much fun, Salty. But no, it's good to be back. Good to have the footy back, and looking forward to the round one in Australia with the Raiders and the Knights on Thursday night. I'll be heading up to Newcastle, so it's good the footy back, mate.
Absolutely, it certainly is. Enjoy, as you say, round one in Australia, and I know you'll be back on next week.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Billy. I'm Peter Psaltis. That has been Billy Slater, and this is the Billy Slater Podcast for Ram Trucks Eats Everything Else for Breakfast. And don't forget, a new episode drops every Monday.
This year, NRL on 9 is your one-stop shop for all footy.
That's right, Freddie. Not about the highlights, action, 7 days a week.
Billy and Gus Podcast, get that on your drive on the way home. Immortal Behaviour, grab a seat on the couch for that. And of course, my favourite, Freddie and the Own.
The best footy brains, the biggest games.
Don't trust the algorithm, subscribe to NRL on 9 and get all your entertainment there.